Hello and welcome to Belongs to the Shadows podcast, episode number 9. It's hard to believe that I'm already at episode number 9. And as always, listener viewer discretion is strongly advised. I'm your creepy host, Jaime Bennett, and I come with a warning label. I'm probably going to mispronounce things. As always, I feel the need to give you a warning. That darn dialect gets in the way every single time, and I stutter trying to pronounce things, so. And I'm going to use this word every single time I do a podcast. I like to do my podcast organically. Yes, I know you all are probably sick of hearing that word, organically, but I like to look at the information and tell you about the information as I'm reading it to you. And I'm going to give the important links down below in the description of this podcast episode because I need to give credit where credit is due. This show is not sponsored by anybody in particular. It's not sponsored, but if anybody would like to sponsor my show, I would very much appreciate it. Also, please smash the like and subscribe button so that I can keep doing this. Who am I kidding? I'm probably going to keep doing this anyways. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because I actually enjoy doing this. So, yeah, there's that. There's that. Anyhow, I'm going to be talking about Madame Curie. Yes, I'm going to be talking about her. And I'm also going to be talking about the Radium Girls. So this episode might be a little bit longer than usual. So if you want, sit back, prop your feet up, get you a nice cold drink because it is freaking hot outside, and a snacky snack. Without further ado, Madame Curie. Last time I talked about lobotomy and, the old practices of psychology and psychiatrists and insane asylums and all that lovely stuff. I will probably dive back into that topic at some other point in the future. And I know that all these topics that I talk about, many people who have podcasts have talked about these same topics. But I like to do research and I like to learn about these things and learn more about these topics at hand as I'm telling you all. So, it's a history lesson. It's a haunted history lesson for me as well. You might be asking, why is Marie Curie even on Belongs to the Shadows? Why am I talking about this? Because radium. That's why. And if you've ever heard about the Radium Girls and radium and what it does to the human body, or what it did to the human body, before they realized that radium is horrible to be around and it causes major problems, there's a lot of creepy history there. A lot of creepy history. And like I said, I will be putting the links below. I'm not even going to try to pronounce her middle name because I know that I'm going to butcher it. So Maria Curie, and she does have a middle name. I kind of cheated a little bit. I looked ahead on this topic because I've always been fascinated by Marie Curie. A genius. She was a genius in her time, and so much respect for her. She was a Polish-French physicist and chemist, as you all know, and she was born November 7th of 1867, and she died July 4th, 1934. She was born in Warsaw, Poland, and she died in Passy, France. This next information, if I can even talk right, it is so hot outside, I'm telling you all. I live in Georgia. I live in Georgia. I'm not going to tell you exactly where I live in Georgia, but let's just say I live in the Northwest Georgia area, near Atlanta. I can tell you that. I live near Atlanta, and it is freaking hot here. This summer has been so hot and miserable, and you got those little demonic fire ants. Our yard is filled with fire ants, but I would prefer those compared to the Asian needle ants. No, thank you. No, thank you. I'm good. I'm good. I will keep my fire ants. Thank you. But anyways, Marie Curie. And this does come from wikipedia.org. Marie Curie, if I can even talk. Like I said, I am not even going to try to pronounce her middle name because I know that I would butcher it. She was born November 1867, November 7th of 1867, and died July 4th of 1934. And she was known simply as Marie Curie. She was a Polish and naturalized French physicist and chemist who conducted pioneering research on radioactivity. Think about that for a moment. Now, what we know of radiation and radioactivity nowadays, just think of how crazy that would have been to be one of the first people to royally research radioactivity and come to the conclusion that it is not good stuff to be around. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. The first woman to win a Nobel Prize. That's amazing. The first person to win a Nobel Prize twice. Not only did she win it once, she won it twice. And the only person to win a Nobel Prize in two scientific fields. Her husband, Pierre Curie, was a co-winner of her first Nobel Prize, making them the first married couple to win the Nobel Prize and launching the Curie family legacy of the Nobel Prizes. She was in 1906 the first woman to become a professor at the University of Paris. That's incredible. That's so much respect. She was born in Warsaw and was in what was then the Kingdom of Poland, part of the Russian Empire. She studied at Warsaw's clandestine flying university and began her practical scientific training in Warsaw in the year of 1891 at the age of 24. She followed her elder sister, I'm going to butcher this and I am sorry, Bronislawa to study in Paris, where she earned her higher degrees and conducted her subsequent scientific work in 1895. She married the French physicist Pierre Curie, and she shared the 1903 Nobel Prize in Physics with him and with the physicist Henry, I'm going to butcher this last name, Beccarii, for their pioneering work developing the theory of radioactivity, a term she coined in 1906. Pierre Curie died in a Paris street accident. Marie won the 1911 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for her discovery of the elements polonium and radium, using techniques she invented for isolating radioactive isotopes. That's interesting. I'm always finding out something new. That's why I love doing these shows too. I love doing these podcasts because I'm always finding out something new. I mean, I got the general gist of Marie Curie, but I never really researched Marie Curie. I just understood, she studied radioactivity and stuff. That's really cool. Under her direction, the world's first studies were conducted in the treatment of neoplasms by the use of radioactive isotopes. She founded the Curie Institute in Paris in the year of 1920 and the Curie Institute in Warsaw in the year of 1932. Both remain major medical research centers. During World War I, she developed mobile radiography units to provide X-ray services to field hospitals. Wow, that's amazing. While French citizen Marie Curie, who used both surnames, her middle name, excuse me, goodness, I'm gonna get a drink of water. My throat is itchy, like whew, allergies and heat. Pardon me. Who used both surnames, never lost her sense of Polish identity. She taught her daughters the Polish language and took them on visits to Poland. She named the first chemical element she discovered, polonium, after her native country. That's interesting. Marie Curie died in 1934 at the age of 66 at the San Selenomois Sanatorium in Passy, France, likely from exposure to radiation. In the course of her scientific career and scientific research, in the course of her radiological work at field hospitals during World War I. In addition to her Nobel Prizes, she received numerous other honors and tributes. In 1995, she became the first woman to be entombed on her own merits in the Paris Pantheon. And Poland declared 2011 the year of Marie Curie during the International Year of Chemistry. She is the subject of numerous biographies. Wow. Wow. It goes on to tell you more about her early life and all of that. I'm going to let you all read that. I'm not going to sit here and read it all to you. It tells you about her life in Paris and new elements and all that. So let's go back and learn more about her. I'm pretty sure that my son told me the other day, because he gets interested in researching about amazing people like Marie Curie. And I'm pretty sure that he said that she was encased in a lead coffin because her body's still radioactive. So let me look that up real quick. Is Marie Curie encased in a lead coffin? Yes, here we go. He was right, and I knew he was probably right. Marie Curie's coffin is lined with lead. This is because her body and belongings remain radioactive due to her pioneering research on radioactivity, specifically with radium and polonium. The lead lining helps to shield those around her from the radiation. That's so crazy. Here's why and what it means. Radioactivity. Marie Curie's work with radioactive materials like radium and polonium led to her death from aplastic anemia linked to radiation exposure. Her remains, along with her laboratory notes and some personal belongings, are still radioactive today. Lead lining. The lead lining in her coffin and the lead boxes used to store her papers are meant to minimize radiation exposure to the public. Duration of radioactivity. So her remains will be radioactive for at least 1,500 more years. How insane is that? And her belongings will remain radioactive for thousands of years. That's insane. Anyone who wishes to view the belongings at the Bibliothèque Nationale, Paris, must wear protective clothing and sign a liability waiver due to the continued radioactivity. That's insane. That's insane. I know that there was another YouTuber that went to, I want to say Chernobyl or something. Like they visited and they had a Geiger meter, and they were in their car, and the Geiger meter was going off and saying how radioactive the surroundings were. Like, it's so crazy. So this comes from IFL Science, and it's asking the question of how radioactive is Marie Curie's body. So Marie Curie's body was so radioactive, she was buried in that lead-lined coffin, like I said. And this comes from science writer Dr. Russell Knoll. I will link this below. But Marie Curie is remembered today for her pioneering work on radioactivity, which I said, which not only earned her 2 Nobel Prizes, but also the recognition as the mother of modern physics. But while her research into the radioactive elements, polonium and radium, may have secured her a lasting scientific legacy, those same substances have also had a lasting effect on her body. Curie was not only the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, but also the only woman to be awarded prizes in 2 different fields in 1896, like I said. That is so incredible that, like, her research led to x-rays and goodness, like, she was a pioneer. That's for sure. Like, she was a pioneer. And I'm not going to read this whole thing to you because I will link it below and you all can look at it for yourselves. But in 1911, after much personal tragedy, Pierre Curie had died suddenly in 1906. Curie was awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for isolating pure radium. So she would go on to devote her research to the study of chemistry of radioactive substances as well as their application in medicine. And in fact, if it were not for Curie's work, our treatments for cancer would likely not be anywhere near as developed as they are today. Yeah. That's incredible. But despite advocating precautions, Curie's constant and prolonged exposure to these substances came at a cost. So she died on July 4th, 1934 from aplastic anemia, like I said, which was caused, of course, by radiation. Despite its name, aplastic anemia is more than just anemia. It is a rare blood condition that appears when bone marrow cannot make enough new blood cells for your body to function properly. When Curie died, her body was so radioactive that she had to be laid to rest in a lead-lined coffin. However, no one knew this until 1995 when her coffin was exhumed. That's insane. Just think of how many people were exposed to her body when she was alive, and, like, you know, her loved ones, and exposed to her body after death. That's wow. At the time, the French authorities wanted to move the Curies to the National Mausoleum, the Pantheon, in honor of their contributions to science and for being icons in French history. The officials responsible for the exhumation contacted the French radiation protection agencies with concerns about residual radiation and asked for assistance to protect workers in the cemetery. Yeah, I'd say so. Man, it just makes you wonder how many people were exposed to the residual effects of her working with radiation. Like, it makes you wonder. It really does. I'm going to have to do more research on this. Like, it really makes you wonder. So let's, yeah. So at least they did, like, their due diligence, I guess, and sought help to make sure that the people who were exhuming her body would be safe to do so. So when the exhumers approached the grave, they detected normal levels of radiation on the air, which then rose as the grave was open, though not by large amounts. At first, Marie Curie's coffin appeared to be made of wood, but when opened, they found it was lined with 2.5 millimeters, 0.09 inches of lead. Later examination of Curie's body revealed that she had remained remarkably well preserved, and only small levels of alpha and beta contamination were detected. This, according to the Journal of British Society for History of Radiology, was likely because Curie had taken steps to limit exposure to radiation in later life. Wow. Less can be said about her equipment, however. After 100 years, many of her belongings, including furniture, cookbooks, clothes, laboratory notes, remain extremely radioactive. The latter are actually stored in lead-lined boxes at France's, here we go, Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Upon requesting access to these objects, visitors are required to sign a liability waiver and to wear protective clothing to prevent exposure to radium-226. Given that this particular isotope has a half-life of around 1600 years, it's likely that these important documents will remain a harmful reminder of powerful legacy. Wow. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. It's amazing what you learn about people that you thought you knew enough about, and then you do this research, and then you find out like disturbing details. Hence why Marie Curie is a topic on Belongs to the Shadows today. So yeah. Here is another article that comes from BBC, and then I'm going to move on to the Radium Girls. So this is BBC, and its feature article, The Hunt for Marie Curie's Radioactive Fingerprints in Paris. And this was published June 9th of 2025 by Sophie Hardak. I will link it below. Marie Curie worked with radioactive material, but not only did she work with radioactive material, she worked with it with her bare hands. More than 100 years after her groundbreaking work, Sophie Hardak, the author of this article, traveled to Paris to trace the lingering radioactive fingerprints she had left behind. So the Geiger counter starts flashing and buzzing as she held it against the 100-year-old Parisian doorknob. She was standing in a doorway between the historical lab and office of Marie Curie, the Polish-born, Paris-based scientist who invented the word radioactivity. And it is in that spot there was a startling trace of Marie Curie. The museum that houses the lab had invited this author to track radioactivity handprints left by Marie Curie when she worked there in the early 20th century. On the doorknobs is one such trace. There were other traces on the back of Marie Curie's chair, and many more of these invisible traces are dotted all over her archived notes, books, and private furniture, some only discovered in recent years. So the Geiger counter, like I told you all earlier, traces radioactivity. And Sam and Colby, I'm pretty sure, I know that I reference them a lot, but their show really is amazing, and they have done a lot of amazing research and have filmed in some amazing locations, including Chernobyl. So I'm going to link that down below because they're talking about radioactivity in that episode, and I think that if you're interested in it and you're interested about this topic, that would be a good episode for you all to tune into. Shout out to Sam and Colby for having an awesome show. I really enjoy their shows. They put a lot of work into their shows, and they do a really good job. The Geiger counter's reaction and the numbers on the display suggest the presence of above background radioactivity, though only at a low and non-threatening levels. Oh, wow. In the microsievert, which measures the potential impact of radiation on the human body, it comes to about 0.24 microsievert per hour, well within safe limits according to the experts. So Marie Curie worked there from 1914 until 1934, the year of her death, handling radioactive elements including radium, which she and her husband Pierre Curie had discovered in 1898. For most of her life, she did this with her bare hands. Increasingly radium-scarred hands. Her hands had a lot of scars on them because she handled this stuff no gloves. She then transferred traces of these elements onto other things she touched, tracking the handprints through her workspaces. One can imagine how she might have gone from the lab to the office, opened the door, and pulled out the office chair to sit down. That is said by Renard Herneth, the director of the Curie Museum, as he guides this author from trace to trace. I think it's incredible that this person took a trip to Paris and wrote this article. Like, it's an article worth reading. I hate these pop-ups. That's so annoying, pop-ups. So yeah, the article continues, and I'm not gonna read the whole entire article, but basically, she's walking you through the museum, and she's talking about the Geiger counter and the different elements in the museum. I just think it's interesting that radiation can be active for that many years. Like, that's insane to me. That's scary. That is so scary. So you gotta think, like, her daughter used her office in later years, and it makes you wonder, like, if Marie Curie's daughter got radiation exposure and had any, like, adverse side effects from it. That's just insane to me. Like, that's scary. So I'm going to direct your attention to the Radium Girls because I think that, all of this goes hand in hand. Marie Curie discovering her work in radiology, and the Radium Girls. It's pretty similar, and I'm going to link the Radium Girls movie. I watched it. It was really interesting, but really, really sad and scary at the same time. Joey King, who is one of my favorite actresses, is actually one of the main characters in the movie, and she does a really, really, really good job. It's a very interesting movie, not sponsored by that movie, by the way, but it's a very, very interesting story, and so I'm going to link that movie below, as well as some other links that I think you all will find interesting. So the Radium Girls were a group of women who worked in the factories during World War I, and in 1920s they painted watch dials with luminous radium paint. And me being an artist, a lot of times, like, I get annoyed if I'm painting something small and intricate. I get annoyed if my paintbrush isn't to a fine tip. And in order, you're going to think this is gross, but if you're an artist and you're a painter, you will totally understand where I'm coming from. And this has a point. I'm going to come back around to the Radium Girls. This has a point. Um, anyhow, I can't stand it if my paintbrush isn't to a fine tip. So a lot of times, instead of dipping it in the water, what we will do is we will touch it to our tongue or press it in between our lips to get it to be that fine point. And that's what the Radium Girls did. And that's why they had adverse side effects from using this paint, because there would be paint remnants on the paintbrush whenever they would, put the paintbrush to their lips to do this, to press the bristles in between their lips so that the bristles would be to a fine point. So they painted watch dials with luminous radium paint. They were instructed to point their paintbrushes with their lips. So, see, I had a point there. I got to it. They unknowingly ingested the radioactive substance. Many suffered severe health consequences, including bone damage, anemia, and death due to radium poisoning. Their fight for recognition and justice led to significant changes in the workplace, safety regulations, and labor laws. So yeah, a lot of times it would cause their teeth to fall out, it would cause bones to rot, and it would cause, like, deterioration of their, like, face and jaw and teeth. Like, that's scary. That is so scary. And a lot of these women were like young moms, or just starting their married life, just starting their families. So the luminous paint, radium, a newly discovered element at the time, was used to make watch dials glow in the dark, which was a popular novelty. So I'm going to sidetrack here. I'm going to sidestep here because I'm an artist. There are poisonous glow-in-the-dark paints even nowadays. And I think that some of the yellow paints are poisonous as well. I was taught this by my art teacher. So I'm going to sidestep for a moment. Sidestep because it's insane to me that even nowadays there are unsafe glow-in-the-dark paints. So, safety of modern glow-in-the-dark paints. Modern glow-in-the-dark paints are generally considered safe and non-toxic, unlike some of the older versions which used hazardous radioactive materials like radium. Why I'm sidestepping here. Today's glow-in-the-dark paints rely on phosphorescent compounds, primarily strontium illuminate, which store light energy and release it as glow in the dark. However, even with non-toxic modern formulations, it's essential to practice safe handling and use. Yeah, I'm pretty sure when I was doing art classes back when I was in college, way back when I was in college, I think there were some toxic um, glow in the dark paints. So yellow pigments have historically been challenging for artists and pigment makers. Orpiment, an arsenic-based mineral pigment used since antiquity, was extremely poisonous and interacted poorly with other pigments. Cadmium yellow, the first modern yellow pigment. So, there's still some yellow paints that are poisonous to even now. Even now. So yeah, check those labels, people. Check the labels. Especially if you're an artist, and especially if you do what I do and put the paintbrush in between your lips. My daughter asked me the other day, she's like, "What are you doing, Mom?" I was like, "Don't do what I do, just do what I say." Because I was like, I'm pointing my paintbrush. I can't stand my paintbrush to even have one bristle out of place. It runs me crazy. So the women use their lips to create a fine point on their brushes, ingesting radium with each stroke. Radium poisoning. Radium's radioactivity caused various health problems, including radium jaw, which is necrosis of the jawbone. Necrosis meaning death. That's scary. Bone fractures. Bones became brittle and prone to breaking. Anemia, deficiency in red blood cells. Reproductive issues, like including miscarriages, stillbirths, and birth defects. Like I said, a lot of these women are newly married. Like they were newlyweds and they were just starting their family life. So the company denial. The companies employing the women initially denied the dangers of radium and even tried to discredit the women's claims. Yeah. Legal battles. The Radium Girls, despite their illness, fought for recognition and compensation, leading to legal battles that brought about significant changes in worker rights, impact on workplace safety. Their case helped establish the importance of workplace safety regulations, workers' compensation, and the need for companies to be held accountable for hazardous working conditions. I don't know if any of you ever worked in a factory, but I have. And there is a hazardous material, like data guide, in a lot of places that you work. Like if you're going to be working with hazardous material, I can tell you that I used to work in a dynamite factory. Yep. Little unknown fact about your creepy host here. I used to work in a dynamite factory. I used to make dynamite for a living. And talk about scary. Really, really scary. There was dynamite that was made in the particular building. Like they had different buildings. I'm not going to tell you who it is. But they had different buildings and they had different forms of dynamite. And I was in what they called the booster building. And one of the forms of dynamite that we would make was pretty scary because like they would put a balloon in the dynamite that was filled with powder, and it could explode if you accidentally hit one of those balloons, like with a wheel or something. Yeah. Yeah. Talk about intimidating. Very, very intimidating. Maybe that's why I'm so intrigued by topics such as this. I don't know. I didn't last at the dynamite factory for too long. It was very, very hard work, and let's just say that they were not wanting to teach me how to do my job. So I ended up leaving that job, and I'm better off for it. Leave it to people who can handle that type of environment. It is not for the faint of heart, and it's really, really hard work. So their legacy, the Radium Girls' legacy, the story of the Radium Girls serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked industrial practices and the importance of worker safety and advocacy. So they may have been responsible for that dynamite factory having, that hazardous material list guide and the safety practices there, because there were a lot of safety measures there. And that dynamite factory had a really good, really good record of being safe. Like, they went many days without an accident. Because, like, whenever you drive in there, it would tell you how many days without an accident. And it was quite a few days without an accident. So here's the Radium Girls, and it's on Wikipedia, where I get a lot of my information. The Radium Girls were female factory workers who contracted radiation poisoning from painting radium dials, from painting clock dials, watch dials, with luminous paint. And the incidences occurred at 3 factories in the United States, one in Orange, one in New Jersey, beginning around 1917, and one in Ottawa, Illinois, beginning in the 1920s, and one in Waterbury, Connecticut, also in the 1920s. So after being told that the paint was harmless, the women in each facility ingested deadly amounts of radium after being instructed to point their brushes on their lips in order to give them a fine tip. And like I said earlier, anybody who is a painter and, uses paint brushes on a regular basis understands that. The women were instructed to point their brushes in this way because using rags or a water rinse causes them to use more time and material, as the paint was made from powdered radium, zinc sulfide, a phosphor, gum, arabic, and water. Wow. The Radium Girls had lasting effects on the labor laws in the United States and Europe, following numerous lawsuits following deaths and illness from ingestion of radium. So the United States Radium Corporation from 1917 to 1926, originally called the Radium Luminous Material Corporation, was engaged in the extraction and purification of radium from carnotite, one to produce luminous paints, which were marketed under the brand named Undark. The ore was mined from the Paradox Valley in Colorado and other Undark mines in Utah. As a defense contractor, USRC was a major supplier of radioluminescent watches to the military. Their plant in Orange, New Jersey, employed as many as 300 workers, mainly women, to paint radium-lit watch faces and instruments, misleading them by claiming that it was safe. How scary is that? How ridiculous is that? Like, I've heard of a toxic work environment. I've even left toxic work environments, but That's taking toxic work environment to a whole new meaning, whole new level. That's crazy what these women had to go through just to make money for their families. That's so sad. So sad. And it's definitely plays into haunted history. Like, can you imagine? Like, I imagine a lot of those factories are haunted. Haunted. Like, these buildings that these factories were in, I imagine are very, very much haunted. Very much haunted. Wow. Wow. So, radiation exposure. The USRC hired approximately 70 women to perform various tasks, including handling radium, while the owners and the scientists familiar with the effects of radium carefully avoided any exposures to it themselves. That's pathetic. Chemists at the plant used lead screens, tongs, and masks, while these women didn't have any protective gear and were exposed to it. Think about that for a moment. That's insane. That is so sad. I'm not gonna go on and read much more of this, but an estimated 4,000 workers were hired by corporations in the US and Canada to paint watch faces with radium at USRC. So each of the painters mixed her own paint in a small crucible and then used camel hair brushes to apply the glowing paint onto dials. 4,000 workers. So, the radiation poisoning, dentists were among the first to see the numerous problems among dial painters, including dental pain, loose teeth, lesions, and ulcers. Yeah, yeah, that's some creepy, messed up history there. That's awful. That is so awful. That is definitely like creepy, scary history there. Really, really scary history. And I feel so bad. I feel so bad for the workers that went through this. And I feel so, so bad that, a lot of them were young women just starting their life, just starting their family life, and they were just trying to make ends meet. But I hope you all have enjoyed this episode. And if you have any suggestions on any future episodes, please drop a comment below. Until next time, stay creepy.